So, good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to this webinar hosted to you by Engagement Factory. It's the second one in our series on marketing transformation, and we're very welcome to have you here. So, my name is Roland de Wit. I'm a managing consultant at Engagement Factory, and very pleased to be co-hosting this webinar together with my colleague, who I'll be introducing in a minute or so. As I said, this is 1 out of 5 currently. Last week we covered modern marketing maturity, which lays the foundation for how we view modern marketing and the steps to get there. And over the coming weeks, we will be diving more into detail on these various topics. So today we will be looking at personas and buying journeys and how they will form a very important piece of input for your content marketing strategy. Next week, we will be looking at marketing and sales alignment, also a vital piece to make the most out of your modern marketing approach. And then we'll be looking at campaign optimization and event marketing. And we're very happy to add more topics to it if you like. So send us a note and we'll be happy to create another webinar that suits with your needs. So how are you able to get the most out of the webinar today? Well, at least stay tuned for the coming 45 minutes or so. And take your relevant notes. We will be sharing the presentation deck with you as well as the recording afterwards. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the chat box on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar, and we will have a look at them and we'll be responding them at the end of the session. We'll also have a few polls during the session, so really looking forward for your answers there as well to see some interaction going. And of course, if you like, join the other webinars in this series. And for now, just sit back and get inspired. So what's on the agenda today? Doing a brief introduction and then having a look at what content marketing and buyer personas is, and actually why a buyer persona is so important for your content marketing strategy. And to provide you with some handy tips, we'll be having a look at the steps for creating buyer personas and also how to apply that to content marketing strategy. It's kind of a lot of information to put into 45 minutes. We'll do our best to keep it crispy. And of course, if you want to take a deep dive, always willing to have a further chat on that. So this webinar is brought to you by Engagement Factory. We are a marketing and sales agency currently with 60 employees and counting, spread across 4 offices within EMEA, covering from the Nordics all the way down to South Africa, really fast growing, achieving great things for our clients, and inspired every day to make the most out of modern marketing, sales, and even the broader customer experience domain. What we see on a daily basis is really the challenges that you are facing, where the buying process has changed, and you might recognize this statistic by the CAB, currently Gartner, that 57% of the buying journey has been completed before someone even reaches out to you as a possible vendor, amongst some other vendors as well. It's not just that, it's also that more and more people are involved in the average B2B buying decision. Gartner currently states about 7. Last time I checked with them, they're already moving towards 10 or 15 if you talk to large organizations even. And all these people massively go online to research vendors and to look what kind of information they can find, hardly being open to meeting sales reps anymore. And with that, about 2/3 of the entire buying journey is done digitally. That's really asking a lot from us marketeers to stay successful in this domain, because what we also see is that even in digital, or maybe because of digital, there's a lack of integration between systems, processes, people, and data. And that makes it more and more difficult to provide an integrated and consistent customer experience. But that's in essence what a customer is expecting from us, or even demanding from us. So this is really a shocking statistic, where we saw that 96% of customers say that they receive mistargeted messages or promotions. You could also say that maybe the 4% that was well targeted might have been a coincidence instead of a well thought approach. And on the other end, we also know that if we are able to provide better orchestrated experiences, that will drive far more revenue and engagement. But still, it's very difficult to do so. But what we're actually aiming to do is make sure that we have the right message at the right person at the right time at the right channel, because that will drive powerful engagement. And in a recent study from the Content Marketing Institute, we saw that about 60% of organizations do not have a well-documented content marketing strategy. and only 35% of them is able to show the actual return on investments on their content marketing strategy. And I saw a recent tweet which was interesting. It literally said, slow down and do your content marketing right, or don't do it at all. And that's what we'll be looking into today. After covering the basics of marketing maturity, we'll now be looking into personas and buying journeys and how they will form a foundation for your content marketing approach. With that, I'm handing over to my colleague Melissa, who will take it from here.
Yes, thank you. So last week, and as Roland just touched upon, we outlined some important steps to take which can help you achieve full adoption of marketing automation. And so yes, this week we'll focus on an important step, which is really creating, helping you to create an efficient and powerful content strategy that delivers results. And this, of course, is the creation of a buyer persona and customer journey. So before getting started, I just want to start with a small introduction of myself. So I have a background in B2B marketing in global marketing departments, and I'm currently working at Engagement Factory as a marketing consultant. And I'm also responsible for most of the buyer persona projects we have created at Engagement Factory, and I've done over 15 buyer persona projects and counting. So yes, done plenty of those. So we have all seen and experienced the explosion of content in the last few years. The amount of content is increasing while our attention span is getting shorter. So just to kind of give you a little quick Snapchat of like what's happening in 60 seconds online. So in 60 seconds online, as you can see, over different types, we have YouTube, WhatsApp, WordPress, Twitter. These different rings represent the different years. So the smallest ring represents 2014, then 15, and the last one is 2016. So as you can see, the content that's being shared and consumed is growing exponentially. And of course, 2017 and 2018, I'm sure have gone up even more than that. So the numbers just keep exploding. So content is everywhere, and infobesity, as we say, is a fact. And much of the carefully created content actually goes unread. But at the same time, marketing and content marketing remains a hot topic. And when asked, most marketers actually plan to create more content and invest even more into their content marketing programs. So just to kind of get a sense of where everyone is at, I kind of want to do a little poll to see, what you do with regards to content marketing. So you will be seeing a poll up on your screen, and please select the answer that's most relevant to you. So it looks like, from what everyone is voting on, it looks like that indeed most of you are actually planning to grow content marketing heavily, and that you are spending a lot. Yeah, still some votes coming in, but it's looking like most of you are definitely looking to be growing content. So that confirms indeed what the statistics say as well. And indeed, more than half of you, in fact, are looking to spend more on content marketing than they have in the previous years. So indeed, it does seem like it's still a very important topic. So indeed, the key to good content marketing is that you have to stand out from the crowd and be relevant when it matters. And this is also the slide that we just saw, the right person, right time, right message. So the next slides that I will be talking about will really show the steps on how you can, start to make your content marketing more powerful with these buyer personas and become really focused so that you avoid the trap of producing content just for the sake of producing more content. So what is a buyer persona? We're going to begin with a really quick overview of what a buyer persona actually is. So buyer personas are generalizations of your ideal client. And although that may include some demographical information, the real objective here is to get under the skin of your target audience and to understand and document what really makes them tick, just beyond, the simple answers that you may get from kind of a superficial type of survey. So ultimately, we want to understand what it would take to have them choose our solution and remove or address all the obstacles that there may be to this sale. You'll want to find out what drives your persona and what are the objectives and key priorities. Also, of course, it's really important to know what the frustrations and the challenges are. This can help you understand how your product could make their lives easier. Information sources are an important part of this as well, as they really help you to understand where they go for information and how they consume it. This will also help you determine later on where you can invest your marketing dollars best. And lastly, you'll want to find out all about the journey they undertake and what that buying process looks like. And a part of this, of course, is also finding out, for example, who the other stakeholders are that may be involved, so that you can also keep them in mind when creating content and to make sure to also address them so that they're not forgotten. So also, again, time for another little poll. I'd like to find out how much you know about buyer personas. So again, you're going to see a little screen, a little question up on the screen, and I'd like to just get a little sense of how well you currently know your target audience, their behavior, needs, and challenges. Okay, the votes are coming in. So it looks like it's trending towards that most of you indeed seem to have been, are doing some research and are perhaps not getting as deep as they would like to, but at least have kind of a generic, have some information on generic level and kind of know who their buyer personas are. So yes, indeed, it seems like most of you indeed have a good idea and have done some research so that you already kind of maybe know who you're dealing with, but perhaps have not gone that extra step and really documented and started using them in your content marketing. So maybe you have still some strides to make there. Hopefully I can help you with that today. Also, a nice little test that you can do perhaps at home for yourself is to kind of think about your favorite TV or Netflix show and the main character on that show, and to kind of think about or to try to describe that character using some of the topics that we just spoke about in the slide you're seeing up on the screen. And then to kind of do the same thing with your customers and prospects, and to kind of notice a difference between a fictional character and then, the client that is actually paying your bills, to see, perhaps maybe, you do know the fictional characters better than your own clients, perhaps not, but it's just kind of a little test to see where you are at. So how do we use buyer personas? So buyer personas can and should be used for different purposes. We traditionally think of using them in marketing only, but that's not the only way that we can use them. So of course, they're very important in content and marketing creation and allow you to be persuasive each step of the customer journey. However, they are also very useful in sales approach, and the phrase is an approach that sales uses in conversation with their prospects. And furthermore, they can also be used in product marketing and proposition development. So understanding what customers really want and how they choose which providers they talk to can even inform engineering or areas of the proposition you decide to invest in and maybe develop sooner rather than later. So for all of these uses, they are definitely good to create. Moving on to the steps that you need to take to create personas. And I know that for many of you, maybe the task of creating a buyer persona may seem daunting, but in fact, it's not as complex as it may seem. So I'd like to walk you through a couple of steps that you can take to start creating buyer personas. And step number one of this, defining your buyer persona. So in this step, you want to define which buyer persona you want to create, and also make sure that you don't create too many of them right away. So if you have, the target of creating 8 personas right away, you may be in for a really, really big project. So it's best, especially in the beginning, to start small and perhaps create not more than 2 personas at one time. And then, of course, if you created them and everything went well, you can always go on to create more as needed. But we advise to not create more than 2 in the beginning. In step 2, it's really all about putting together a list of relevant questions and to kind of get you started on, so what is it, what information would you really like to get from these interviews that you'll be having. And in fact, it should be more of a discussion guide than like a survey type questionnaire. Of course, the objective here is to have a conversation where you really probe them on what's important and you really try to get under their skin and dig deeper and deeper on why they're making certain decisions. And if you're not sure really what questions you should be asking or how you can do this, you can of course always we can help you put this together, or we can help you with that. But there are also some methodologies that can help you with this. And the one that we recommend and use ourselves is the 5 rings of buyer insights from Adele Ravel. I will touch on this a little bit later on in the presentation so that you can know what she's all about. In step 3, this is where we start the research and we conduct the interviews. So buyer personas are created using a mix of some desk research, interviewing salespeople, as well as, of course, external audiences. And another starting point can also be to look through some contact data to uncover some trends about how certain leads or customers are finding information and are consuming your content. This can be a good starting point before you start your external interviews. So it's completely fine to use, some desk research or some data research and then couple it with external interviews, which is the step 3B here, where we, of course, want to also speak to some real people. Again, of course, we want to speak to sales maybe because, of course, generally the sales has a very good idea of who their customers are as they're speaking to them every day. But ideally, and you also want to speak to external people, and this can be a mix of prospects, existing customers, and non-customers. And with that, I mean, closed lost deals, for example, to kind of understand maybe where it went wrong or these people have a different perspective. And also involving sales will also increase the likeliness that they will accept and use the final personas, because sometimes we see that there can be a little bit of differences in how marketing and sales see their target audiences. So involving them early and getting them on the same line with you can also help you further on in the process. And then, of course, yes, taking into account your sales team feedback on the leads, sort of what generalizations can you make about the type of customers that you serve best. In step 4, we really look at the information and making sure that you are really documenting them somewhere. So don't let the information you gather sit on a computer or just have it be some kind of thought. Make sure that you create an actual profile and print it if needed, so that it can be leveraged across different departments in an organized format. And of course, step 5 is to really make sure everyone in the company knows about the persona so that they can use it and that you really have one common view of the persona, and you can be proud of your work as well. So it's a nice way to show off what you've done. And just a little tip before we go on to the next slide is that of course, when you're doing these type of projects, it's really important to invest the right amount of time, budget, and resources to do it well. A buyer persona, if done well, can really serve you for a long term and really inform the content strategy and everything. So if you do that well, all the subsequent things you do with this persona will also go well. And cutting costs or time for this type of project is kind of a shame, because it's something you may not do all the time. So if you do it once, you should do it the right way. Okay, on to the next slide. Also wanted to share a couple of don'ts with you for buyer personas. So of course, it may seem obvious, but don't use ballpark guesses or assumptions when creating buyer personas. They should really be based on what actual people are saying so that you get the right insight and you can act on that insight and are not kind of creating something based on gut feeling. Also, yes, as I said before, don't create too many personas at once. It will seem really daunting and you may get a little bit lost. Also don't use them only for marketing, as said. Implement the persona across your entire funnel strategy and let everyone in the organization know who they're dealing with, especially those in sales and services as well. And finally, don't base your personas just on demographics. Some demographic information is, of course, important and okay, but mostly it should be psychographic information, the challenges, how they measure success, how they consume media, etc., etc. So I want to quickly also touch upon the methodology before. I spoke earlier about Adele Rivella. She is actually the founder of the Buyer Persona Institute, and she has created what we call the 5 rings of buyer insight. And this is also the methodology that we use at Engagement Factory. And the 5 rings of buyer insight help you to uncover all of the important insights that you want to make sure to include in your persona. And if you are interested in knowing more about this methodology, she actually has written a book, and the title is up on the screen right now. And so you can also find it in the presentation that you will be sent after this webinar. So if you want to learn all about these 5 rings of buyer insight, I could recommend this book. It's a good read. Okay, so after the buyer persona, we're going to go on to the buyer journey. Of course, understanding the buyer journey is really important when creating a buyer persona, and this should be part of the buyer persona creation. The objective here is to really map the behavior and the challenges, etc., that you uncover during your interviews for each of the phases that they go through. Because then ultimately you can match content to each of these steps and be relevant across the whole buyer journey, and not just only when they're close to buying a product or when they're at some different stage. You really want to make sure you cover all of the stages with content so that you stay relevant and you stay top of mind for them. So up on the screen right now is an example of a buyer journey. This is how we do it. There's, of course, different ways to do it, but we typically document the motivation, the questions, and then some of the key messages in value proposition that could help to answer those questions. So you can, of course, customize this to add more things that may be relevant for you. But what it really does is just allows you to get a clear idea of what your persona does and thinks at each step. As well as it allows you to get the first ideas on which content can best address their needs at each step. And so really the key messages in the value proposition will kind of take us from the buyer journey to the content map, because then we kind of start to think about content creation already, and this is where your content marketing and content strategy come into play. So applying buyer persona insight to the content marketing. So of course, this is always a step on, what do you do with all the information that you gather from this persona, and how can I use it in such a way that actually makes sense, and so that, this information is actually being used properly. So content marketing based on buyer personas. Using buyer personas and putting your audience at the center of your content marketing will allow you to build trust because you're sending relevant information, and you're kind of becoming an advisor and a thought leader. So you're really being helpful rather than just being spammy and irrelevant. And that's really kind of the key message here. So as I hinted at before, after the buyer journey, the next step is really to create a content story map. So this is kind of taking the buyer journey and taking it to the next level by starting to tag some usable content pieces to it. It will allow you to see also for which step of the journey you have already enough content and where you may need to create some new content. So it's it also allows you to be really more efficient in your content creation, and so that you're not just creating for the same things over and over again. And this is to show you a quick example of what a content map may look like. So it basically takes the questions from the buyer persona. As you saw in the middle, we had the different questions that the buyer persona is asking in the buyer journey. So what we do here basically is that we map all these questions and we write them down here, and then we start mapping some content to them. So you can, for example, divide them up into different themes if that's helpful for you. But then you really start to look at, okay, so this is a question, how can I best answer that question? So you start to write down some ideas, what some key messages may be to answer the question that persona has at that particular stage of the buyer journey. And then you also start thinking about some promotion channels, right? So if they're really at the top of the funnel, they're really in the awareness stage where you're just kind of Googling around and looking for, some buzz terms or some, they may have heard about something. They're not really sure yet what they're looking for. You don't want to bother them with really heavy ebooks or white papers, because they will not give you that kind of time. So at that stage, it's very important to have this small snackable content, some blog posts or some infographics, things that they can quickly look at. Videos are also appropriate here in these early stages. So kind of having to think a little bit about how you can best promote this content. And then the last column here, existing, means do you already have this content available or not? And this gives you a nice overview to kind of see where you stand with your content. So, where are the gaps? Where do we need to create more? And where do we already have enough? So to also kind of sum up and to go over a little bit what we just spoke about, I just want to take you through some of the steps that effectively help you going from the persona to the content to the campaign. So as I said, you want to start by looking at the buyer persona and looking at that buyer journey. You populate the questions into content story template like I just showed. And then for each of the questions in the buyer journey, identify the answers through content key messages. They can of course be a little bit longer, but that will come later. So in the beginning, you just want to tag some key messages and decide on the formats. And then in step 4, you want to identify if the content already exists for all of these key messages, and kind of make an inventory basically of what you would need. So where are the gaps? Where do you need to create content? Where do you have enough? And also, what are some of the quick wins? What content can you use right away? Because of course, you don't always have the resources or the time to create this new content. So can you, for example, reconvert some of the content? Can you reconvert a white paper into an infographic or something like that? So it's also thinking smartly about what you already have and repurposing it so that you don't have to spend more money. And in step 5, when you have done all of this, you can really start to go to the campaign creation part. So you would basically take this map and kind of figure where is it that you want to influence right now. Do you want to, create more awareness, be more prominent there, and then you kind of start with the information you have on that step, and you can, then translate that into a welcome or a nurture campaign, and use those messages and make sure you address those messages in the emails that you are sending. And so to kind of wrap this up a little bit, of course, we have done this for many of our customers. So you can see a few numbers here of the projects that we have already done. Some of the buyer personas and the content maps and all of the work we have done. And to give a little bit of color to this, I would also like to take you through an example. This is an actual case study that we have done with Philips Lighting, a project that just went live. And this is what Philips Lighting wanted to do, is that they had a new proposition that they wanted to bring to the market. They knew who their target audience was, but since it was a new proposition, that was something new that doesn't really exist yet. They didn't really know, how they should interact with this target audience, and how this target audience would potentially see Philips and how they could kind of best communicate with them. So of course we thought, if you don't really know who you're talking to and what they're thinking, the best thing to do is to start with the buyer persona. So we can see the phases here that we went through. Of course, we started off with buyer persona. We then went to the campaign strategy creation, created some themes that were then, again, of course, based on the persona. Finally went through the content creation and mapping, and then we also created assets for the campaign, and then some lead routing as well. So we also looked at the whole lead management part, as well as the acquisition. So I will just take you through some of these steps to kind of give you a little bit of information. So just to give you some background information, the product that they put on the market is a light that includes sensors, and these sensors are able to see if a space is being used or not used, and basically give you a lot of information about that. So if a space is not used, it could also mean that maybe you don't need the space, or maybe you can, or a whole floor or a building, so then you can only rent 2 floors instead of 3 and save money there. So for the target audience, this is really important because it allows them to make important decisions on real estate. So again, here are the different steps that we went through in this project. So for the first step, the buyer persona, we create the buyer persona here. Here's the head of corporate real estate, a little bit of graphic information, and then we of course have a lot more information about him, what he did, what his challenges were, what his priorities were. Once we had done that all, including the buyer the buyer journey, we after that also did a content mapping workshop where we looked at and covered some themes. And these themes were created with the persona in mind. So effectively what we did is that we looked at all the information that the persona gave us, what were they most interested in, what were they working on, what were their success factors. And we came up with 4 themes that were basically present throughout the whole company and were translated into different assets, etc. So the 4 themes are noted here. We have alternative workspace strategies, real estate optimization, the power of data, and finally, the sustainable organization, because we knew that these were all things that the buyer persona was working on or really, concerned with. And by knowing this, we then kind of went to the campaign and the content creation part. So this is what the campaign actually looks like. And it's maybe a little bit small, and I'm not sure how well you can see it, but you can see kind of in the middle, the blue boxes are the different themes that I just spoke about. And so they really sit at the center of this campaign because people would basically land on a website where you have these 4 themes, and then these themes would then break into more detailed information on that particular theme. And then it would even go into a nurture campaign that was then also based on that theme. So as you can see, the buyer persona was really carrying was really the starting point for all of that information that turned into that nurture campaign. And to show you a little bit more about the content creation, so of course we worked with copywriters and such to create all of the assets, but you need to definitely inform copywriters on what they need to write. So you have to kind of create this messaging structure on what are the topics, what the topics are that they should write on, what is important to mention. And again, a lot of the keywords even, but also specific information items were directly pulled from the buyer persona and kind of briefed to this copywriter to make sure that all of those insights were properly translated into actual copy. And finally, I wanted to show you just a couple of examples on what the actual assets look like. So on the left and in the middle here, you have some screenshots on the home page and on some of the theme pages for the website, the microsite that we created. And on the right side is an example of one of the emails. So as you can see, that all kind of nicely came together. It was a big project. The project took over a year, but in the end, there's a wonderful campaign now that is live, and so that was a big accomplishment. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of color on how that could actually work in real life. So before I end it, I just want to talk about a few small key takeaways. Of course, influential marketing requires deep buyer insight. So as you can just see, as you just saw from the Philips example as well, you have to put in the work to get out something really great. And it's all the small details that create the bigger picture, right? It may only seem like a keyword to you, but that keyword used correctly can mean all the difference to someone who really knows what they're talking about. And people don't like to be targeted with fluffy language, right? So you have to kind of really know their language and make sure you stay relevant that way. Yes, and a common vision of the target audience, as I said, also improves marketing and sales alignment. And this is, of course, a really important relationship to get right. So it can really also help there to make sure that those two remain friends. Start small, right? So start with one persona, test it out, see how that's going, and then you can also always build on that. And and then also, of course, then take your buyer persona to the next level by really creating a content story there and looking at your content and seeing how those can fit together. And of course, at the very end, if you need help, if you have any further questions, we would love to help, and feel free to contact me anytime. So with that, I would like to take it to the questions, and we'll have a look to see if you guys have any questions.
Yes, I already have some questions for you, Larissa. Thanks for sharing this. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, an enormous amount of interesting information fitted into only 30 minutes speaking time. So congratulations on that one. I think it would be a very good one if you would listen to the recording of the session and then also have a further look at the slides that we're going to share. Some questions, one would be, how many interviews do you need to build a persona?
Yes, so this varies a little bit, of course. We generally recommend about 10 interviews if you don't have any previous information. So it can be 10 to 12, also depending on the role you're doing. If you have a partial buyer persona already, but you feel like you need a little bit more insight, you can also do some complementary interviews, and then that would maybe be like another 4 to 6 on top of the information that you may already have.
Okay, and how do you make sure you get enough people participating in your interviews?
Yes, so this is always a tricky one, of course. So what we usually do is we try to ask, we ask the help of sales, because sales have, already have the relations with their clients. So we involve sales to get them to help us recruit the right people. Another option, of course, can be finding these people through LinkedIn. You can send them messages with LinkedIn Premium. That can also work. Important here is to kind of not really frame it like you need something from them, but try to give something in return, like make them feel like they're part of something exciting that you're developing, so that they feel like their voice is actually going to contribute to something that you're creating. And then a third option also could be to involve agencies. So there are some agencies out there that can help with the recruitment of these type of people that have large databases and are specialized in recruiting for focus groups and such projects. So those can also be leveraged to find respondents.
Okay. And always burning question is always is, what does it cost me in terms of time and money to do persona research the right way?
Yep. So we generally see that a buyer persona project takes about 3 months, and so 3 months is the buyer persona research, including the buyer journey, not really with the content mapping part included. So that initial research takes about 3 months. Of course, this can vary a little bit depending on how willing the respondents are to cooperate. As I said, recruiting can be a little bit tricky, so some people are very willing to cooperate, and sometimes, yes, you may need to push a little bit harder to get these people to cooperate. So give or take 3 months, and then sometimes it can be a little bit more depending on how quickly you can find them. With regards to budget, of course, also depends a little bit, but it's about 12K that you would have to invest in that.
Any shortcuts to it?
Any shortcuts? Well, of course, as I said, I don't think a shortcut is a good way, because I think buyer persona research needs to be done thoroughly in order for it to be valuable. So I think shortcuts may kind of end up, as with everything in life, you end up having to do it again, or having to spend more money than you wanted to initially, because you have to redo it, or do it twice. So I would always recommend in doing it the right way the first time. Yes, however, of course, if you have a limited budget, you can also, you can use the data you have, you can talk to the internal salespeople, but yeah, for the best results, we recommend definitely doing a full research with external respondents.
I learned once from a former colleague, you got good, cheap, and fast. You can pick two. So keep that in mind if you think about developing personas and journeys. One final question, and before maybe we're going to close up or receive someone from the audience, is there one single question that you always want to include in buyer persona research? Like if we do customer satisfaction research, currently there's the NPS score, would you advise us? Is there one single question that you always want to have included in buyer research?
Yes, I think the most important thing in buyer persona research to ask is always to ask about the buyer journey, because effectively you want to know how and when they're making these kind of decisions. And by knowing the steps that they're taking to buy something or to make their decision, you also have the challenges in there, and you have the triggers in there. So, but by knowing what they're doing there already, it contains most of the other questions that you may want to ask. So I would say if there's one thing you want to focus on, it's definitely that buyer journey. And through asking them about the journey they're taking, you will uncover the other insights that are relevant as well.
Okay, cool. Well, with that, I think we are at the end of this session. As we said, this is a part of a series. So next week we'll be talking about marketing and sales alignment which you already saw today again as a good alignment. So involve sales in building up personas, and also make sure that you use the personas when you do the other types of work, not just marketing, but also in sales and in service. And then on campaign optimization, the end of January, and then we'll continue with event marketing. And as I said, if you have any topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to send us a note, and we'll happy to create some content around it, because there's enough out there to share with you. So for now, if you have any further questions, reach out to Larissa directly or to one of us at the company, and hoping to see you next time as well. Thanks for joining. Have a great day. Bye-bye.